Who was that cheering for Farm Match when I was back there? Thank you. I told Marcus I didn't want to talk about Farm Match because, a lot of times when you go and speak at these events, if you own a company or whatever it is you're selling and you get up and talk and then you really start pushing your own company hard, it looks like you're really just giving a sales presentation more than an educational experience. But thank you, Marcus, for that. Hey, you know what? It's a real honor to be here all with you today. A special thanks to John Miller and his team at Superb. John, I don't think you're here right now, but if you watch this recording afterward, this is one of the most organized events I've ever been to. You guys are making it happen through bad weather, through construction, and I'm just really impressed. And not trying to knock at any of the other conferences that I spoke at. You guys are doing great too, but this event is really something to talk about. Thank you. Yeah. Look, over the next 30 minutes, or maybe a little bit less, we'll see how we come in for a landing. I don't want to be too late for lunch, but we're running behind, but I'm told I have a little bit of a buffer, so we'll just see how it goes. I'm going to try to compress some of the information, but I want to make sure that you get it all. But over the next 30 minutes, you're going to hear some of the most effective, potent strategies to reversing bowel disease that are available on the planet today. If you follow these recommendations, my promise to you is that you're going to see some really good results, all right? There is a little bit of a disclaimer, though. The disclaimer is that this information isn't for everyone. Like the prior speakers mentioned, you got to have your agency and think about things and understand your own conscience. So this information isn't for everyone. Some of the information is going to be totally backwards to what you've been taught. Some of it's going to absolutely shock you. It might even change your religious beliefs. I hope it doesn't. But by the end of this presentation, my promise to you is that some of you might even think I'm an alien, but hey, I got to tell the truth, so here it is. So why should you even care about bowel disease and restoring your digestive health? Well, as it turns out, we have 340 million, 100,000 Americans living in the country, and 133 million of us have been diagnosed with disease, all right? That's 40%. So if you look around, and maybe we have a couple thousand people here at the event this weekend. It's not a weekend, Wednesday, Thursday. I've been traveling for a while. So we have 2,000 people here. That means 800 of us are diagnosed with disease. Out of all the diseases that are diagnosed, the 40% of us that are diagnosed officially with a disease, 47% of those diseases that are diagnosed are bowel diseases. Irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, some kind of tummy trouble. So that means that you have almost a 50% chance, if you're diagnosed with a disease, to be diagnosed with a bowel disease, all right? So bowel disease is at the forefront of our health problems today, our health crisis that we're into. If you follow the MAHA movement, that's a lot of what they're talking about. So whenever I go to an event, I like to really sit more than I speak because I learn so much at these conferences. I'm always looking at the person on stage. I'm saying, who the heck is this guy? Where did they get him? And why should I listen to what he has to say? And I've just always been that way since I was at a very young age. I've always been questioning and kind of cross-examining. Is that true? Is it not true? So I want to give you a little bit about my background, where I came from, how I got up on this stage here before you today, and then we're going to go into some of the recommendations and advice that I received from some of the health mentors in my career as someone who's overcome degenerative Crohn's disease. So I'm 48 years old on April 5th, just turned 48 not too long ago. I grew up in Chicago. Has anyone been to Chicago before? Raise your hand if you've ever been to Chicago. All right, I'm a Chicago boy from the west side of the city. Grew up in the concrete playground, knew absolutely nothing about the country or pasturing cows or green grass or anything. And at the age of 11, I had a very challenging life. At the age of 11, my parents were getting divorced. My father was getting indicted into federal prison. And my mom and my 4 brothers and I were getting evicted from our house, and we were going to live in a homeless shelter. So right around that time, shortly after we got evicted, I started experiencing some of the most horrific, terrible, painful symptoms of abdominal distress that you could ever imagine. There were some points in my life when I was 11 years old in that time that I was clutched in the fetal position, holding my stomach on my side, sometimes for up to 72 hours straight. That's 3 days, all right? No food, no water, just struggling in pain for 72 hours in a homeless shelter. So when you're down and out, you get free health care. So I went to the doctors, and to their credit, usually doctors are really fast to give you drugs and surgery and pills. But to their credit at the time, the doctor that I was seeing, she said, I think this might have to do something with emotional stress. I don't really feel good about giving this 11-year-old, all these pills right now. Let's just kind of let this ride out, see if it goes away, because I was living in a very stressful situation. So as it turned out, the pain kept coming back and back and back and back. And so the doctor decided to send me, and if you've been to Chicago, you might know the neighborhood, send me to the south side of Chicago where they have the University of Chicago. And they gave me this procedure where they scoped me inside and out. They basically put me under with general anesthesia, and they went up me and down me with a camera and basically had a tour of the inside of my digestive tract. What they found was that my small intestines was ulcerated all the way through. They found 34 ulcers, and they stopped counting there. And they diagnosed me with degenerative Crohn's disease. Now, to give you a little bit of a picture of what I looked like at the time, I was 69 pounds and losing weight. My skin was very pale, I was anemic, and I could not properly digest food to save my life, literally. So right then, they prescribed medication right away after the diagnosis. Has anyone ever been on prednisone before? Just shout out some numbers. How many milligrams a day have you been on? Highest dosage, let's hear it. How much? 85. You might be the winner of the whole tent here. Anyone else? No one can compete with 85. All right. Well, I weighed 69 pounds, and they put me on 60 milligrams of prednisone a day, which is a lot of prednisone, even if you're a full-size adult. And they put me on 2,000 milligrams of the latest and greatest anti-inflammatory at the time called sulfasalazine. If you follow the medical profession, every 3 to 5 years they're changing the anti-inflammatory drug. However, prednisone it seems to be the one constant that they keep. So they put me on meds, and the medication did help. It did alleviate a lot of the pain. However, I could never regenerate tissue properly. So when I started to gain weight, I was gaining water weight. I wasn't gaining healthy athletic weight. And if you're taking notes, and I hope you are, I wasn't regenerating healthfully, so there's a cycle found in life. It's called the regeneration cycle, is what I call it, and it's different for every organism. For human beings, there's 3 aspects to the regeneration cycle. It starts with activity, that's exercise, followed by eating, and followed by sleep. So you have exercise, eating, and sleep in that order. Those 3 activities have to happen concurrently in order, like a schedule for you to properly digest and regenerate tissue and build your body through the food you eat, okay? So they put me on the meds. I wasn't regenerating properly, and so all through my adolescence, my teen years rather, every few years they would change the meds up a little bit. The prednisone stayed constant, but I went from sulfasalazine to Prevacid to Asacol, dicyclamine. There was always a different anti-inflammatory drug they were giving me, and I got moved around to a lot of different hospitals. The first doctor I saw was a gastroenterologist, a pediatric gastroenterologist. Pediatric meaning they only see children. So after you get older, they just say, well, you're too old, I only see children. I don't need to see you anymore. Go find another doctor, and they usually make recommendations. So over the course of the next 10 years of my life, I saw probably 6 different specialists at 5 different hospitals, and they all gave me the same diagnosis and hope, is that, look, with degenerative Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease can affect you anywhere in your digestive tract from your anus up to your throat. Now, Max, if it happened to affect you in your large intestines, you might have more hope because we can remove the large intestines and you can walk around with a colostomy bag. Not an ideal situation, but hey, at least you're alive. Well, the way your small intestines works, it's similar to your heart, your liver, your brain. It's like vital. You can't live without your small bowel, right? So all the doctors that I saw were all giving me the same advice of you're going to die young, don't expect much out of your health, and try to have some fun while you're alive. So as it turns out, right in my early 20s, someone very near and dear to me in my heart was a committed heroin user. All right, I don't like the word addiction, so I call it commitment. He was a committed heroin user, was using heroin every day, totally destroying his life. I was watching this happen before my eyes. And I was talking to this person, I was saying, what are you doing? You're destroying your life. You don't have to be putting this in your body. He said, no, Max, you don't understand. I'm addicted. I can't help myself. I need this. I said, no, you don't need that. And I was giving him all this great advice, right? And so anyway, there I am one day driving northeast in Brookfield, Illinois, through the drive-through of the Walgreens drive-through, picking up my prescription one day. And I don't know what happened on that day, but I heard all these sound bites of my own voice just flashing through my head of me giving advice to this person. It was kind of like one of these man-in-the-mirror moments where you hear, are you going to take your own advice? You kind of like look in the mirror. And I don't know what happened, but it just started, these sound bites started flashing through as I'm driving through to pick up my prescription at the Walgreens. And I realized that that Walgreens was my drug pusher, that I was the addict. I was the one on pills. I was the dependent one that said, I have to have this. This is my life. This is me. There's nothing I could do about it. And I wish I could tell you the story. I wish I could tell you the story and then I drove right through the drive-thru and I didn't get the pills. But guess what? I got them and I took them. But later on, in the not too distant future from that point, I started really reflecting on my life and the choices I was making in my body and what I was putting in my body. And I decided that I was going to change my role. So if you're taking notes, this is a key. You have to change your role. The role that most of us play is, what can the doctor do for me? Well, that doctor can't do anything for me. What can this doctor do? Well, you can't do anything. What can you do for me? You have to start asking what you can do for yourself. If you have some kind of a health condition, thank you. I'm specifically talking about bowel disease, but if you have any kind of health condition, it doesn't matter if they have a cure for it. You be the inventor. You go find the cure. You make it happen. If nothing else, you should be more interested in your success than anybody else. Why should the next guy try and figure out how to solve your problem? He probably wants to go have a great time on the beach with his family, And so I decided I was going to change my role. So I really dove into self-care. And I started going around a lot of conferences and nutritional workshops and reading books. And unfortunately, I found that in the natural health industry, it is not much different than the medical profession. There are a lot of pills out there. And similar to the speakers, the gal who was talking, she said that it was like 100 pills a day could fill up her hands. I wasn't on that many supplements, but I feel her pain, right? I was spending a lot of money on supplements. And after my diagnosis, just quick switching back, I was placed on permanent federal disability. All right, so that $675 a month check from the disability did not allow me to buy many supplements. And I didn't find that many of them worked anyway. But anyway, I finally made my way to this man. His name is Jim Marlowe. God rest his soul. He passed away last year, unfortunately. But I did make my way to Jim Marlowe, who was the chief nutritionist at Dr. Mercola's office for 10 years, way back in the day when Dr. Mercola had a clinic in Schaumburg, Illinois, before he moved down to Florida, like decades back. And so I had plans to meet Jim Marlowe in the West Loop of Chicago at a Whole Foods, in that little seating area at the Whole Foods where you can sit down and eat. And I had an appointment to meet him, and this was the man that was supposed to coach me and help me on how I could use self-care and really change my role and do whatever it takes to turn my health around. So I got to Whole Foods first, and I sat at one of the tables, and I see this man walk in. He looked a little bit like a hippie. He was bald on top with a ponytail in the back. And he comes in, and we kind of make eye contact. And one thing I noticed about him right away, he had amazing skin. I mean, the guy, you could just tell, just from his skin alone, you could say, this guy's a healthy person. And so he walks up to me at the table, doesn't sit down, and he says, "Are you Max?" I said, "Yeah." "Jim?" "Yeah." He said, "Come on, let's go sit somewhere else." I'm looking like, what's wrong with the table? He said, You're sitting on the table right there is a microwave, all right? He said, "We don't want to sit next to the white microwave. This microwave is going to give off radiation and hurt us if someone happens to come by and use it." And he said, "And when it's not in use, it could be giving off radiation anyway. I mean, who knows? You don't want to sit by a microwave." I thought, okay, So this is the first thing that Jim taught me, and he never taught me this with his language. He taught me this with his actions. You need to really be meticulous. Being meticulous is vitally important to overcoming bowel disease. If you're taking notes, write that down. Being meticulous is very important. Sometimes being meticulous can mean the difference between winning the gold medal and not winning the gold medal. Olympic athletes are extremely meticulous. They are looking for that one little edge that will inch them forward a little bit more. And let me tell you, from someone that has overcome an incurable digestive disease, overcoming incurable disease, the time, the effort, the whatever it takes you have to put into that is very similar to trying to win the gold at an Olympic event. Jim and I come down to the table. We move away from the microwave, and we're at this other table, and Jim is saying, "Okay, I'm here to coach you." And so this is the first thing he tells me is, "Max, if you're going to learn self-care, you have to learn how to experiment on yourself and stop trusting secondhand information." And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience. Everyone knows Bobby Kennedy, RFK. Everyone's heard of that name, right? You watch any of his interviews, what's the guy saying virtually to every interview? "We're not using the gold standard of science, the double-blind placebo study. We're not using it, gold standard, So what Jim is telling me, and he wasn't referencing Bobby at the time, but what Jim was telling me, he was saying that a lot of the science out there is not really done in a scientific way. He said a lot of the information is just secondhand. It's through hearsay. It's through survey. He said, you're going to have to find out the truth. I can help you push yourself in that direction, but if you want to overcome this, Max, you really have to learn to experiment on yourself. You have to be the scientist. Don't listen to the secondhand information. Try it yourself. And then he went on to say, he said, by the way, most of the healthcare professionals, I'll never forget he said this, most of the healthcare professionals are just doing best guess. And if anyone's going to guess on you, it might as well be you. So then Jim goes on to say, okay, I'm going to give you some suggestions on what to experiment with right now. And I said, okay. And I was actually there with, I was very scientific myself. I had my little notebook and I was taking notes. And so Jim says, first thing I want you to do is I want you to go find a goat farm where you can get some raw goat milk and make some kefir. Kefir is the correct pronunciation from Eastern Europe. We pronounce it kefir in the United States. And so I said, like raw milk, I'm not going to get sick from this. Don't we pasteurize it for safety? He said, Max, you don't believe the information. Go experiment on yourself. See for yourself. And I'm starting to think, okay, well, this guy worked for Dr. Mercola. Dr. Mercola is well recognized. Maybe he knows something. It's worth a try. And a lot of the books that I read that, had mentioned about kefir as well, right? So then, okay, Jim, raw goat kefir, got it. What do you got next for me? All right, now this is where the disclaimer comes in that you heard 10 minutes ago, all right? So Jim says, all right, next thing I want you to do, besides raw dairy products, I want you to eat raw meat. I said, raw meat? Are you like, come on, you're like, he almost totally lost me. I just lost most of you right now, but I was like, I was hanging on by a thread because I was so sick and I wanted to do something, and really turn my health around. There really is nothing more motivating than I ever found than severe pain. I mean, when you're in pain, you're kind of desperate, you'll try anything. And so he said, look, I'm going to ask you to experiment on yourself with a diet of raw animal foods. That means the raw milk, and it also means raw meat. So I said, like, what kind of raw meat are we talking about here? He said, all of it. I said, raw chicken? He said, yeah, raw chicken. I said, come on, man. Like, at this point, I was almost at the point where I wanted to ask for my money back because it was like $100 to sit down and talk with the guy, But anyway, the information's coming from this guy who looks like the epitome of health. So it was very believable, right? And he spoke to me with confidence. And so I'm just taking my notes and saying, okay, Jim, what else do you got for me? And then Jim went on with a long list. I'm not going to give you the whole list for time frame, but I'm going to give you a few more things, and then I'm going to tell you what happened when I implemented it into my life. The next thing that Jim told me to do is he told me to stop looking at food prices, all right? When we look at food prices, we're basically saying, my health is worth this price. My health is worth this price. I don't know how much I pay for milk anymore. I don't know how much I pay for butter or meat. But what I learned that day is that when you're buying food, you're investing in your health. Your diet, the food that you put in your body, is the most important investment you will ever make in your life. There's more to the sentence, but thank you. Is the most important investment that you'll make in your life if your goal is to have a functioning body. All right? If you want your kidneys to work, your joints to work, if you want to be able to keep up with your children and grandchildren in your older age, I tell you what, I'm a man of faith and I pray, but I've never seen anyone that prayed their disease away. All right, for me, I had to change my diet. So stop looking at food prices and look at your food as an investment. The other thing that Jim told me that really stood out was he told me to embrace cleansing for what it was. And I asked him to explain a little bit more. What do you mean embrace cleansing for what it was? And Jim said that, have you ever had diarrhea? Have you ever vomited? Have you ever, he goes down this list. And I said, yeah, and I hate it. And he said, that is a form of cleansing. That is a form of healing. He said, oftentimes, if you go to the emergency room, they diagnose you with some kind of foodborne illness because you're vomiting. He said, oftentimes that's your body healing, perhaps, from some environmental toxins that you might have interacted with. And maybe it had nothing to do with the food. He said that, oftentimes, and maybe some of you can relate, you're driving down the expressway next to one of those 18-wheelers, and there's literally black soot coming out of the exhaust pipe. Raise your hand if you've seen that before. Okay, I hope everyone's raising their hand. If you haven't seen that before, you haven't been on an expressway. And sometimes it's just on the country roads too. So he said when you go into the emergency room, they don't ask you, hey, have you been driving down the expressway today and breathing any of that black soot? I think you got the pollution flu. They don't do that, And probably if they say, have you been drinking raw milk from a local farm, they'll probably say, oh, the milk got you sick. Even though, by the way, like 500 other people had the same milk and they're doing just fine. So So that's their gold standard of science. So you really have to embrace cleansing for what it is. I think most people have thrown up before. You know the nausea feeling of how terrible it feels before you throw up and then after you throw up? Dude, you feel great. Like that. Yeah, everyone's nodding their head. Yeah. It's like, dude, it's like waiting backstage there. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I'm so scared. What if I forget this? And then when you're done with your presentation, you're like, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Okay. Has anyone else ever spoke before in front of a couple thousand people? Okay. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Quick, fun, 30-second side story. After I got my health back, I went on to perform in 5 semi-professional ballets and 1 aerial circus show. All right. And I'm backstage with the ballet master. His name is Sasha York. And this guy has danced ballet all over the world in front of royalty in Europe. And we're in little La Crosse, Wisconsin, where the population is about 100,000 people. It's about 30 seconds before we're about to go on stage. The curtain's about to go up. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, hey, Sasha, are you nervous? I'm a little nervous. He said, yeah, I'm nervous too. I said, how could you be nervous, man? There's like 500 people in the audience. We're in Little La Crosse, Wisconsin. You've danced in front of royalty. How can this make you nervous? He said, well, you know what? This is what I came up with, Max, in all my career dancing. I said, what's that? He said, when you stop being nervous, that's when it's time to quit. Great advice. Keep that in your mind for other areas of life. All right, so embrace cleansing for what it is. I want you to imagine a worm, and we are like a worm with appendages, all right? Arms and legs and head. So, right? Think of yourself as a worm. And for people with digestive distress, this is going to be one of the best one-liners you hear to relieve your pain, and the pain goes away pretty quick, all right? So imagine you're a worm, and you have an inner skin and an outer skin. Now, everyone knows about the outer skin, all right? We exercise, we sweat. People like, a good healthy sweat those poisons out. What you won't hear in most places is that, guess what? Your inner skin, your digestive tract also sweats just as much and more as the outer skin. Most of our detoxification happens through the digestive tract. So the digestive tract doesn't just dump and absorb, it also pushes back. When you're breathing that black soot, when you're driving down the road, it goes through your lungs, takes a ride through the blood into the lymphatic system, and it will be in your digestive tract within seconds. All right? 2 of the most important foods you can eat to detoxify your bowels are raw, unsalted cheddar cheese. It has to be unsalted. The other is clay from the earth. If you can't find clay or cheese, eat dirt. It's the 3rd best thing. All right? If you're going to get dirt, go deep in the forest where, there wasn't who knows what from 10 years ago. It's got to be unsalted. And when I say raw, I mean cheese that's never been heated over 105 degrees. You have to call the company and ask. Pasteurization, there's 3 levels of pasteurization. There's lower, like 135 degrees for 20 minutes, 161 degrees for 13 seconds. Then they have ultra pasteurization, which, by the way, you don't even need to refrigerate the milk anymore at that point, if you don't know that. They put the ultra pasteurized milk in the cold cooler just because that's where you're expecting it. They don't have to put it in there anymore. They could put it on the shelf next to the peanut butter. And when I asked the employee at Whole Foods why they put it in there if they don't have to, they said, well, if we put it on the dry shelf, no one would buy it then. I said, well, yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay, I get it. So raw unsalted cheddar cheese or clay, eat about a golf ball size of cheese 10 minutes before you eat a meal, and that will help you with your digestive discomfort. So remember that we detoxify. We are a worm. Most of the poisons that are coming out of your body are going to do so from your digestive tract. Let's see, we're about 11 minutes over here. Okay. The last thing Jim told me that I'm going to tell you about today is to be totally, utterly unrealistic. If you want to be realistic, you're going to end up being in that 40% of people that get diagnosed with disease. And then 47% of you are going to have some kind of a bowel disease. So if you don't want to be in that situation, you have to be totally unrealistic, because reality is those statistics that I just told you. So be meticulous, extremely meticulous on what you put in your body. Be willing to experiment on yourself with a raw food, animal-based diet. Get that first-hand information. Question the science. Find a farmer. Stop looking at food prices. All right? Embrace detoxification for what it is. It is going to be a long road of struggle, but if you continue to be unrealistic the whole way through, my promise to you is that you're going to overcome your digestive disorder. Thank you very much for spending this time with me today. Thank you.